Duterte Economy Council. Okay, so a few quick reminders. This meeting is currently being live streamed at the social media platforms of the Asian Solidarity Economy Council, and we are actually live in their YouTube page. And then also, this meeting is going to be recorded for those people who won't be able to attend the afternoon sessions, since we are putting this in the Dakila platform. And for those who will have questions or comments or feedbacks or anything that you have in mind as we go through the discussion, please feel free to utilize our chat box. We are more than happy to answer those, or Prof. Bench would be more than happy to answer and address those questions, okay? While we are having this session. Okay, welcome to Module 7 and Modules 8. Module 7 is about SSE and decent work in the formal and informal economies. And Module 8 is about SSE and the future of work in the digital age, which is one of my most favorite topics. So I'll be more than happy to listen to the lecture as well. Okay, but before we proceed further with the discussion, a few quick reminders. Okay, I know that for most of you, you may be feeling, I mean, we have been doing quick checking on you every day, like every now and then, since we would like to make sure that everyone graduates after this. So please make sure to respond to our messages when we are asking for updates about your asynchronous exercises. I just contacted a few people for the second round of updates. So yes, and I'm happy that a lot have been responding. So I'd like to remind this again that we have modules 1 to 8 uploaded in Dakila. And we have asynchronous exercises which need to be accomplished, like assignments, discussion forums, among others. So please make sure to accomplish those. We are now heading towards graduation. So like in a few weeks, we will be ending the course. So we would like to remind everyone to please find time to finish the remaining asynchronous sessions which we have in Dakila. If you will be needing help in accomplishing those, we can be contacted through Telegram or through email, and we are more than happy to assist you, especially in doing study plans or in organizing your schedule for you to be able to accomplish these activities. Okay, and another reminders about payment. Yeah, I have received receipts from trainees who were able to make a payment for the course, and for those who are still not able to make a payment. Uh, Payment details are usually being shared on the email which I normally send at the beginning of the week. So please check the details out there. Okay, so before we continue, I prepared a little activity for everyone, the same usual activity, a Mentimeter activity. So for those of you who are in front of their computers or who are using laptops or tablets, okay, so let me just share my Mentimeter screen here. So please open a browser. Okay, let me just look for this. Yeah, and please type in www dot menti, that's menti dot com. And if it asks for a passcode, please type in 5534314. Again, please go to www.menti.com, and please use the code 5534314. To those who won't be able to access Mentimeter, you can just put your answers on the chat box. Okay, so you should be led to the first question of our Mentimeter activity, which is, what do you expect to learn from our session today? Yeah, I can see an answer here, right? Yes, definitely. I am also looking forward to hear a lot about workers' rights. Yeah, definitely. And again, just like what I said, I will have to listen to Prof. Bench lecture because this is one of the topics that I'm really interested to learn more. Okay, what about the others? What are your expectations from today's? Yes, another input. Yeah, workers, right. So yes, according to Marilyn, deep meaning of decent work. Yes, definitely. We would want to know more about um decent work because this is something that we need to really get serious about, especially in the Philippines. So yes, another one, know more about decent work. Okay, so what about the others? Are there inputs from other participants about your expectations from Prof. Bench, from the discussion, from our co-trainees? What are your expectations? Okay, so I'll give a few seconds for the rest to answer. Okay, going once. Okay, so going twice. We have one Zoom message here. Recent, yeah, according to Prime, yes, recent statistics of informal economy workers in the Philippines. Thank you for sharing about that. Okay, so what about the others? Any other expectations that you would want to share for our session today? Okay, so going once, going twice. If there are none, let me proceed to the bonus question. Okay, so yeah, this is just a fun question for everyone before we begin with a serious discussion. Yeah, if you would be stuck in an island or any island, like say for example a distant one from the city, what three important things, material or not, should you have with you? Okay, again, if you would be stuck in an island, say for example, okay, yeah, but before that, according to Prime, another input from her is any update from Sir Benji Velasco on MACWI or MACWIE. Let's address that later. Okay, so for this last or bonus question, anyone can participate. If you would be stuck in an island, say for example, for a month or so, what three important things, material or not, should you have with you? Okay, for me, just to share, I should have like a book with me because I can actually let a day pass by without any cell phones or gadgets, but I need to have a book to read. Okay, I need to have water and I need to have a good blanket with me. What about the others? What are the three things that you should have with you if you will be stuck in an island or if you would be stuck in an island? Okay, we have people from the chat box sharing. According to Alice, knife, pail, and malong. Thank you, Alice. Marilyn, we have cell phone. Yeah, of course. I think most people would agree that they need to have their cell phones with them. And then medicines, of course, and water. Yeah, so what about the rest? A vessel to boil water, dry sticks, and knife from one of our participants. And then we also have here, should have food, shelter, companion. Of course, companion is important. And we have here, according to Tuka Prime, water to drink, of course. We have ka-olive. Cell phone, yes. Most people, I expect people to answer cell phone, matches, and of course, medicine. Yes, one of the participants shared survival kit and the knife and malong. Okay. How about the others? Are there any other sharing or inputs? Okay. Before I close this, going once, going twice. Okay, so let me introduce first our resource person before we proceed with the discussion. Okay, so let me just share my screen again. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, give me 1 second here. So, okay, so our resource person for this afternoon session is an assistant professor at the School of Labor and Industrial Relations or SOLAIR of UP Diliman. He is also the co-convener of the Alternative Development Program of the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies and director of SOLAIR's Center for Labor and Grassroots Initiatives or CLGI. CLGI was formed by SOLAIR to capacitate trade unions and informal workers in cooperativism and entrepreneurship. And he was active in labor and social movements before entering the academe and still remains engaged through research and extension work. Okay, so friends, this afternoon, let's all give our warmest round of virtual applause to Professor Benjamin Velasco. Go ahead, Prof. Benj.
Thank you, Vince, for that generous introduction. Okay. And also for lively opening of this session today, including the Mentimeter activities. So maraming salamat, thank you, and again, good afternoon to everyone or good day, whatever the time is in your place. So yeah, we're discussing today two modules, I guess the same as in earlier sessions, that we try to compress two modules in one synchronous or Zoom session. So for today, we'll be discussing one, the intersection of the SSE with decent work. And then second, the intersection also of SSE with the future of work. So I hope those are interesting subjects for everyone here. So I see, oh, there's a lively discussion in the chat about Malong. Okay, guess that's important too, right? So I see, I guess just from the names, I see participants coming from the Philippines, kababayans, Filipino, like just like me, and I guess others here and in Southeast Asia. So probably Indonesia, yeah, and I think also there are friends from participants from South Asia, right? Just judging from the name, okay, and I think also that's what the profile of the participants that we have. Before I proceed to the actual lecture and then discussion, uh, let me just say that there are assignments in the Dakila platform. So that's the asynchronous portion of our course, right? So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with those terms, synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, so what we're having now is synchronous because we're all participating at the same time, right? In Dakila, it's asynchronous because it's we can go there at our own convenience, and most probably we will not be doing reading and interacting in Dakila all at the same time. Maybe I'll do it today, others will do it tomorrow. So that's why we call it asynchronous. So the text of the modules are in Dakila. And also, if you notice there's an assignment. For every module, there's an assignment. So I saw a few, actually very few answers to the assignment. So I hope similar to what Vince has mentioned, okay, we encourage everyone to do the assignment, okay. I'm not sure, Vince, everyone has to do the assignment, right, to graduate. Am I right?
Yeah, the official trainees, Prof. Benj, they need to finish the synchronous assignments, discussion
Yeah,
forum, yeah,
yeah.
to graduate, yeah, to receive the certificate of completion.
Yep. So that's because we want to issue certificates, right? And of course, certificates are an evidence of what you have learned and accomplished. Okay, and I guess other than attendance, okay, in the activities and sessions, one of the ways by which to assess how much you have learned is through the assignment. So I encourage everyone to not just for this particular modules, of course, but for the others. But I cannot see because I'm not the resource person for the others, so I cannot see what has been accomplished in the other modules. But for here, I saw a few and I made a few. I made comments, but I didn't make a grade yet. So I'm just gonna wait for others to submit their assignments and then do the grading. Okay, because as you know, grading is actually a kind of complicated matter. It's not that easy actually to grade people's work, right? So you have to be judgmental. I don't know. There's an expression in Filipino. Don't be judgmental, but a teacher has to make a judgment, okay, and give a grade. So because there's a subjectivity in grading. So in my case, I try to do the grading all at the same time, right? Because today, if I grade the assignments and I'm happy today, right? So probably your grade will be in the higher portions. But what if later I got into a fight with my wife, okay, and I get stressed and anxious, and then I also do the grading of your assignments, okay. I unfortunately I might even fail you, right? So in order to diminish that level of subjectivity, I'll try to do the grading all at the same time. So anyway, again, just to motivate everyone, okay. Hope you do the assignments as soon as possible. Of course, it takes time, but I guess daily learning needs investment in time and, of course, understanding, right? So, trying to reflect upon what you have read, right, and see how it applies to your own experiences and context. So, okay, that's the most important thing about learning. Not just learning what others are doing, but of course seeing how is that relevant to our own particular situations, our individual life, our life in our communities, in our countries, for example. Okay, and in our case, as probably informal workers, even across the whole region, right? So sige, that's quite a long motivation. Okay, but just the simple is hope you do the assignments as soon as possible. Okay, so right, and then yeah, so I guess there's a couple of explanations about Malong. So I hope Suraya that cleared up things about what is Malong. Okay. So again, good afternoon. Okay, good day to everyone. So let me just share my screen. How do I do that again? Almost forgot. So let me proceed to a short video. Okay. So let me stop again. Sorry. And then do it again. I need to do something. Share sound. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see, Prof.
Okay, so I'm gonna this is just a short, less than 2 minutes introduction to what is decent work.
The Sustainable Development Goals. The new development agenda is 17 goals and a universal commitment to end poverty, hunger, and reduce inequalities. To make our planet cleaner, safer, sustainable, and to work together to fill our lives with opportunity through health, education, justice, and prosperity. Decent work helps us achieve all of these goals. But what is decent work?
Sir, we can't hear the audio very well.
As a priority, and not just any job, quality jobs. Not just
What was the audio, Prof? At its loudest na.
inclusive, and sustainable. Decent work drives sustainable development. Decent work for a better world.
Okay. Sorry for that if the audio wasn't loud enough.
It's okay,
So
Prof. There were captions naman below.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
there were
it's because of
captions
the
there.
video na.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's with the audio settings of the YouTube channel. So let me just share my screen again. Right. I hope you can see it. Right. Vince.
Yes, yes, Prof. We can see the screen. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, as you saw in the video, so it mentions the sustainable development goals, and then decent work. SSE was not mentioned there, but that's our topic for today. We'll try to connect those two things, or actually, you can actually say three things. The SDGs and the decent work is an integral part of SDG. It's actually SDG 8, if you still remember the 17 sustainable development goals. Is decent work is number 8. Okay. In this module, we have 3 objectives. One is to explain what the decent work agenda. Okay, it's propounded by the International Labor Organizations, by the International Labor Organization, but it's also now universally recognized, I would guess. Okay, and embedded in several treaties, conventions, and also in different national legislations in different countries. And then second, to see how the social solidarity economy can improve or advance decent work for workers in both the formal and the informal economy. And then finally, we would like to illustrate how decent work is advanced in the SSE by looking at a concrete case study. So we'll look at one particular case, and today we'll look at the Mondragon Cooperative. Okay? So just to guide us, at least for the first part. So we have 2 modules for today. So this is for the first module. For the first half of our session, this is what basically what we will go through. Okay? If you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand. Although I may ask for assistance from Vince, because while sharing, I cannot see everyone anymore. Okay, or of course you can just unmute yourself, and then you're welcome to interrupt. Okay, so what is decent work? So work, of course, is fundamental for human beings, right? One, of course, is because we need work, because we need remuneration, we need income, right? In return for working, people usually get remunerated. They get a wage. Okay, usually that's in the case of workers in the formal sector. They have an employer. The employer hires them, and they get paid in wages or salaries. Okay, but sometimes we don't have employer. We are self-employed, or we are own account, or we work in the setting of a family farm or a family enterprise. Okay, so there's no boss, but still we need remuneration in order to live. So we have incomes from our small enterprise or self-employed labor. Okay, so work is fundamental. One, because of the economic aspect. Okay, We need money in order to provide for our necessities in life or to get our daily bread. Okay. But also there's a non-economic, okay, or a moral dimension to work. Work is also fundamental to human beings because it is an expression of their individuality and their potentials. Okay, so that's why actually people are usually referred to in reference to their profession or occupation, right? So for example, when I was introduced by Vince, he mentioned my name, of course, and then together with that, he mentioned what is my work. Okay, so I'm an assistant professor at the School of Labor and Industrial Relations. Of all the many things about me, okay, when Vince introduced me, he mentioned my work or my profession. Because really, if you think about it, right, okay, we are defined by what we do uh, in our profession or in our line of work. So me, I'm a teacher. So for example, I guess many of us here would say, I'm a worker in this company, and I'm doing this particular work, or I'm self-employed in this particular social enterprise, right? Or cooperative. Okay. So work has a moral dimension. It expresses our individualities. Okay. But we do not just want to have work. Okay. Of course, not having work is bad. Okay. But having work that is a bad job is also not what is not part of our what are called normative agenda. We don't want that people just have work even if it's a bad kind of work. So we have this concept of decent work. We want work that has characteristics of decency. Why? Because basically we want economic growth that is inclusive and sustainable, leaves no one behind. So everybody progresses, not just a few. And how does everyone progress if they have work that remunerates enough, okay? That they have jobs that are stable, that they won't lose their job in just a couple of months. That if they meet contingencies or shocks in life, like for example, they get sick, or women workers get pregnant, then they will still have an income through forms of social protection. So if we disaggregate it, decent work has 4 components. How do we ensure that work is decent and therefore provides for growth that is inclusive and sustainable? Well, one, okay, people need to have jobs. People need to have employment. People need to have livelihood. There must be opportunities to earn a wage and to earn an income. So that's number 1. Okay. Okay. So we do not want people or even millions who are unemployed. And unfortunately, in many of our countries, that is happening. Okay. In the Philippines, I guess today, the number of officially unemployed is around 3 million. Okay. So that's still large, but much smaller compared to the height of the pandemic when there was more than 4 million out of work. Okay. Although, of course, that's the official unemployed. So that only means that these are the people who don't have any kind of work for an hour for the previous week. So if you think about it, if you have a work that's just for 1 hour in a week, that is still not decent work, right? So number 1, we want people to have work. But second, together with that work, they must be able to exercise certain rights and freedoms. Okay? And that being at work complies with certain international labor standards, okay, international recognized minimum that what workers, formal and informal, should be enjoying. So that's number 2. We must be able to exercise rights and freedoms while at work. Number 3, this work, these jobs, these livelihoods must provide for levels of social protection and social security. We can discuss that later, but just to summarize it immediately, these are forms of sustaining people amid certain shocks in life. That's what I mentioned earlier: sickness, pregnancy, loss of jobs, or retirement. Okay. The 4th component of decent work is social dialogue, or sometimes it's called tripartism in certain contexts. Okay, we'll discuss that later, but just again to summarize it in a short in a few sentences, social dialogue provides for voice and participation for workers, again, while at work. In other words, we don't want people working as slaves, right? People who do not have rights and cannot do not have channels for redress of grievances of their workplace complaints. So decent work has 4 components. Okay, that's very important, and they're all integrally related to each other. You cannot have decent work with just 1 out of 4 or even just 3 out of 4. Decent work necessitates all 4 of these components. Okay. Now, how can SSE improve decent work? Okay. Well, there are a varieties of way by which we can do this. Okay. But one is that decent work is a challenge in the usual context, because traditional companies are behave through profit maximization. Okay? Corporations, companies are entities or institutions that try to maximize their profit. Okay, so I think we are all familiar with this in real life, right? So traditional businesses or any business, okay, necessitates an investment of capital. You start with a certain amount of money, you invest it in building a certain a shop, a store, or a factory, right? And then you have cost for operations. Businesses hire people, okay, in order to operate the machines or provide the services. Okay, so all of that entails an investment of money, or what we call capital. And of course, the people who invest capital, okay, investors or owners of businesses, okay, they are motivated by the desire for return on their investments. So that's what we call profit. Okay. Now, investors are not just satisfied with any amount of profit. Okay. They need to maximize their profit. So what does that mean? For a certain amount of investment, okay, for example, they allocated $1 million, okay, they want a certain percentage of profit out of that capital. Okay. Now, what is what is the maximum profit? Well, there's really no ceiling to what is the maximum profit. But investors are able to judge by observing who are their competitors and how much do those competitors get in terms of profit. Okay, so this context of competition, okay, provides the conditions for investors to judge what is their desirable profit. Okay. Okay. But what is important is the point that that's the DNA of a business, okay, of a traditional business. They invest capital and they need to maximize as much as possible the profit out of that capital. Okay. Now, what does that imply? Well, in many situations, okay, that of course runs aground that serves as a barrier to compliance with decent work. Okay, why? Well, because decent work actually entails also cost. Okay, if you have fair incomes, so that increases the labor cost. If you enjoy certain rights and certain protections, so for example, coverage in Social Security. Okay, so Social Security is usually a partnership between the employer and the employee or the worker. So there's a certain portion for Social Security that's provided for by workers, and a certain portion, and usually a larger portion in many jurisdictions or countries, okay? A larger portion is actually provided by the employer. So the employer share is usually bigger than the employee share in Social Security. So Social Security, public health insurance, employees' compensation in terms of accidents at work. Okay, so those are different forms of social protection. So in terms of from the point of view of an employer, that of course entails a bigger cost, providing for Social Security. Okay, so if you want to maximize profit, you need to be more efficient. Okay, and part of that efficiency means lessening your expenses in labor. Okay, and cheapening of labor costs usually implies derogation of decent work. It violates these principles of decent work because you try to give a wage that's as low as possible. You try to maneuver around paying social protection, or you do not try to hire people as regular employees, but just as precarious workers or non-standard or workers, or in the Philippines we call it contractual workers. So there are different ways by which employers can cheapen labor costs, and that of course derogates decent work. Okay, so so this is really, that's why actually the ILO has an advocacy, or what they call a normative agenda for decent work, because the reality is in many jurisdictions, in many countries, even in advanced, in more developed countries, okay, the attainment of decent work is challenged by increased competition among companies, many of them global companies that try to maximize profits, and that therefore results in cheap wages, insecure work. It results in unsafe working conditions, in lack of social protection. Okay, so but that's in the DNA of traditional companies. That's how they are, because they try to maximize profits. Now, if you take a look at it, SSEs are governed by a different set of principles. Okay, SSE, SSEO, social and solidarity economy organizations. Of course, those that engage in business, they would still need to earn a profit on their capital. but they are not necessarily profit maximizing institutions. The realization of profit out of capital invested by social enterprises, cooperatives, okay, are tempered by a different set of principles that guide SSE. Okay, so I will not reiterate, of course, what has been mentioned in earlier modules. So we all know how the different DNA by which the SSE operates. Okay, but it's obvious that it's not profit maximizing. That basically differentiates the SSE from traditional businesses. So this therefore implies also that the SSEOs are not do not emphasize the interests of their shareholders. Okay, traditional businesses, their capital comes from shareholders, and shareholders, by investing in a certain company, of course, want to maximize their profit. If not, they will take out that capital and bring it to another company.
Sayang amat sih ya.
Yeah,
But
is that
profit maximizing stakeholder, not shareholder focus.
is that a question? I'm not too sure. Hi.
I think she accidentally unmute, Prof. You can go ahead.
Okay. So if there's a question, you can put it in the chat, raise your hand, or again, just unmute. Okay. So it's SSEOs are stakeholder focused. Again, in contradiction to in contrast to traditional businesses with our shareholder focused. So SSEs try to ensure the well-being of their stakeholders. So who are these? Well, of course, they're owners to cooperatives, they're owners to social enterprises, there are members of associations. So these are not usually a few individuals. Instead, they comprise a bigger set of people. So SSEOs, okay, try to ensure the well-being of a bigger set of the population. Okay, they're not just focused on the interests of a few. Okay, so that's why this aligns better with the agenda for decent work. So users of SSEOs, their customers, their owners or members, and even their workers, the SSE tries to ensure that the benefits, even the profits that social enterprises, cooperatives earn are redistributed to a bigger number of people. So in terms of cooperatives, of course, that's integral to how a cooperative is. With social enterprises, okay, they're very different with traditional businesses is that they try to ensure that the business operation of social enterprises work towards the improvement of the well-being of the community. Okay, so that could include redistribution of profits or providing cheap and affordable services or products. So in all those different ways, SSEOs are stakeholder focused, and therefore it's a way for it's a way by which the SSE is able to improve, comply with the principles of decent work. Another way by which the SSE can improve decent work is that because SSEOs are embedded in grassroots communities. Okay, think of a global company like Coca-Cola, like McDonald's, or Apple. Okay, so these are large multinational companies, okay, headquartered in the more developed countries. Okay, they encounter, we have an encounter with these global brands in our lives because we buy their products, we consume their commodities, okay, or we for example, through Google, for example, we use their services every day, but they are so far away. Okay, we do not have a voice in how Apple, Google, or uh, Coca-Cola operates. Okay, they impinge on our lives because these commodities, these services are part of our daily lives. But corporate decisions are made by just a few people. Okay, and we hardly have any voice in that. Okay. But SSEOs, by their very nature, are up close and personal. Okay, they are built by close to the communities that they serve, and so that's why it's easy for people who are impacted by the SSEOs. Okay, either those who consume their products and services, or those that work for those SSEOs. Okay, to be able to raise concerns, issues, even try to settle grievances, for example. Okay, and it's quite easy because they're embedded in those grassroots communities. So it's easy to settle complaints, for example, okay, if those concerns SSEOs. Okay, and that's of course very difficult if you talk about global brands, or not even global brands, even just big companies in our different countries, right? So if you have a grievance, you have to go through the courts, etc., etc. Okay, for SSEOs, that's probably not the case. And then last, a way by which the SSE is enables decent work is because SSE operates through democratic set of principles, right? They have a different set of governance mechanisms, okay, in which members, users, okay, consumers have a role in how the SSE operates in different ways, or one way or the other. Okay, so any questions? Any questions in this intersection of SSE and decent work? So what we're saying here is that in comparison to traditional companies, which actually in many cases challenges the agenda for decent work, and that's why in fact there's an advocacy to improve decent work. For the case of SSEOs, in different ways, SSE enables the improvement of decent work. Any questions before I proceed? Okay, so none. I see none, so I'll move on. Okay, so one, SSE are job creators. Okay, in many cases, work in SSEOs is labor intensive because SSEOs are usually not big. These are not big companies, big institutions, certainly not global companies. Okay, they're small, medium maybe in certain cases, and therefore they're not as capital intensive as traditional businesses. Okay, the very lack of capital, because they usually lack resources, they lack money as investment capital. So SSEOs rely instead on manual labor, on a bigger percentage of labor input. And that of course means they hire more workers or employ more people, okay, or they have more members, okay, who work or participate in the operation of the SSEO. Second, many SSEOs hire people who actually would be unemployed in the usual circumstances. Okay, they may not be as educated, and therefore they have a difficult time being hired in traditional companies. Okay, but because SSEOs are embedded in their grassroots communities, they're built by ordinary people, or SSEOs serve marginalized communities. So in many cases, SSEOs employ people who would otherwise be unemployed or unemployable, or even if they're employable, because of their certain vulnerabilities or marginality, they could be people with disabilities, okay, or mothers who cannot work full time, but still need to have some kind of work or additional income. So in this particular circumstances, the SSE comes to the rescue in a sense, because they usually are the only sources of work in those situations, or they are the ones who the unemployed, the underemployed, okay, mothers, for example, or the youth, who are usually the largest segment of the population who are victims of unemployment. They can get employed by SSEOs. Another is that SSEOs provide a pathway for people who want to have their own livelihoods. Okay, they cannot be hired by traditional companies. Okay, think of rural people, okay, who cannot find jobs in traditional businesses in the countryside. Okay, but they can set up a small business. Okay, but in many cases they lack capital. But SSEOs, by their very nature, okay, are less capital intensive. Okay, and through forms like cooperatives or social enterprises, okay, these rural workers can start their own businesses. Or think of, again, mothers or recently retrenched workers, okay, the more elderly retrenched workers, of course, have the hardest time finding new work. Okay, so SSEOs through cooperatives, associations, or social enterprises, through home-based work. Okay, these are pathways by which would-be entrepreneurs, okay, are able to start their own small businesses. Okay, even if they lack the usual resources for traditional startups. And certain studies actually show that SSEOs are more resilient in economic recessions. Okay, surprisingly, okay, you would think, right, that in an economic crisis, it's the bigger companies that can survive. I guess that's still true. But in small businesses are usually the ones who fold up or close shop amidst a recession, right? Because if you understand the difficulties of an economic recession. But SSEOs, because of their different set of DNA, the different way which they operate, that actually provides a certain resiliency to downturns in the economy. But if you're in an economy, if you're a cooperative, okay, or an association, okay, there are mechanisms by which these are even more capable of adapting. So for example, a cooperative can decide to forego wages in the meantime until uh, the economy picks up. Okay, so they from waged employment, they turn to like some kind of voluntary work. Okay, so that the cooperative survives. Okay, but when the economy picks up again and business is back to normal, then the cooperative can pay back this like previously unpaid work. Okay, and so the cooperative benefits because it continues its operation. Okay, the workers are able to have sustained work. Okay, and what they don't get for a time, okay, they get paid back when the economy gets back on its feet again. Okay, so that's just one way by which actually SSEOs can be more resilient in economic recessions. There's actually data on how many jobs does the SSE sector provides. Okay. On a global scale, there are around 2.9 million cooperatives. They have 11 million members, of course, that are able to benefit from the cooperatives through a portion of the profits. They employ 16 million workers who benefit from the cooperatives through waged employment. So they get a salary for working for those cooperatives. The members, of course, don't necessarily get a wage unless, of course, they're worker members. Okay, but members of cooperatives benefit through the return on their shares. Okay, and an even bigger number, 252 million, are indirectly employed by cooperatives, and most of these millions of workers are in agricultural cooperatives. Through the supply chains of these cooperatives, they benefit from the operation. Okay, so that all in all, there are hundreds of millions of people that are directly or indirectly employed by SSEO. So if you think about it, of course, on a global scale, there are billions of people. The labor force on a global scale numbers in the billions. But the SSE actually accounts for not an insignificant number of people who are directly or indirectly employed. Even in advanced or developed countries such as the European Union and the United Kingdom, SSEOs employ a huge number of 19 million, which already accounts for 6%, more than 6% of their total labor force. And in a less developed country setting such as India, data shows that there are approximately 2 million social enterprises, and they more or less employ 38 million. Of course, 38 million is a big number, but then again, of course, India, of course, is a country of I guess a billion people or so. So they're not by any chance is the SSE a majority employer, right? But they're also not insignificant. Okay, for a certain section of the labor force, the SSE is able to provide gainful employment. Okay, they in reality, SSE is able to generate real jobs that for people who would probably be unemployed in a traditional setting. Any questions while I look at the chat?
Yes, we have one question, Prof. Bench, from Alice. Yeah, from the chat box. SSEO start off small, hence they cannot afford to provide all that you said. Up to when is the leeway for them until they should provide those four factors?
Yeah. Okay. In terms of requirements, of course, there are none. The decent work agenda, of course, is, as if you want to understand it, okay, it's, we call it a normative framework. Okay, by normative, we mean this is what we want. Okay, at the end of the day, we want to achieve this. We know, we understand, we recognize that today there's no decent work, but we will work towards decent work. So I guess the important thing is that the SSE is able to provide a process to upscale from vulnerable work to decent work. So that's how, I guess the best way to look at it is that the SSE starts a process for the achievement of decent work. So do we do it gradually? Do we do it on a faster pace? Of course, that depends on the circumstances. Okay? But the very fact that the SSE is organized in a different way from traditional businesses means or implies that the SSE is better positioned to achieve decent work. Is there any other questions that I missed? And also, I hope I answered Alice's question.
Yes,
She can make a,
thank you, Prof. Bench. Yes, actually, Dean Inday po has a hearing here. You may want to expound it, Dean.
Bench, I just wanted to maybe emphasize the more recent figures about the co-op movement.
yeah.
Because I think the figures you cited are a bit
outdated,
on the lower side. But how many billions of people are we now? Well, 7 billion. But cooperative movement says it has reached more than 1.2 billion members, no? So maybe not in terms of employment, but in terms of engagement, and maybe shareholder investment in cooperatives, 1.2 billion members believe in cooperatives, and I think that's a very huge amount of people. And then I don't know, but the employment figures we gathered from some other source says something like 280 million. And then the top 300 co-ops, because I think in terms of data sourcing, this comes from co-op source. I think the EUM, I think is a European source, but we can check the sources. I just wanted to maybe emphasize the fact that the co-op movement is a huge one, and that we are proud to be part of it. And maybe later the Mondragon example will give us an idea how vibrant and how upscale it can possibly be, if it's well organized and it's really worker-centered. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dean Inday, for the update on the numbers. Yeah. And then I see Rodmark with his hand raised. Yeah, Rodmark.
Hello, Prof. Benjamin. First of all, sir, I thank you very much for the comment you gave in the homework I submitted. I just want to apologize because I was trying to paraphrase, so it will become like a reviewer for me. But just to answer, because we're exactly in the topic, no. One thing I just want to comment on this slide that you're presenting, I really resonated with the number 2 point that's here. Usually SSE work is labor intensive because this is part of what we do also, and a lot of people question how we do things. Like we a brief backgrounder, we provide micro ice plants for communities, and we train them to make it as their own livelihood, as their own enterprise. And the way we set it up, the way we designed our equipment was to take out all the bells and whistles so that we can keep costs as low as we can, so that we can go to more communities. But because of this, it became more labor intensive. So there's on one hand, it provides work for the members of the communities that we go to. It provides work opportunities for them to be part of the operations of the micro ice plant because it is labor intensive. But many people question question our intention of doing this, and it resonates with me because somehow I feel validated in what we're doing, that it's not wrong, because many people criticize it and say that we're making it harder for community people. But uh, for us, it was a choice between providing something to more communities or making the costs higher. So, but now I'm happy that I see this and you're discussing it also, that it's really a lot of SSE work is labor intensive. But also, as I said in our previous meetings, I am still lost. We are still lost as an organization in terms of our place in. We're just learning about SSE now, and for several years now we were trying to study SE because we didn't know we were an SE organization also, but now there's SSE also, and we're still trying to find our way. But many of the things that is part of the module now that you are giving a lecture for is a validation on what we're doing. So I'd like to thank you very much for sharing this.
Well, I also like to thank you for sharing the experience of the micro ice plants. So I guess that's an concretization of what we were discussing about the ability of SSEOs to provide gainful employment to people in the communities. And I also see Dr. Ben.
Yes, Doc Benny is raising his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Benji. Actually, I'd like to address part of the concern of Alice. You see, as pointed out by Professor Benji, the people employed in the SSE entities, they have skills and knowledge that are not necessarily acceptable in the public sector or the private sector. That's why they cannot find jobs in the public sector, government, or in private companies. Mahirap silang ma-employ because they have low skills, low knowledge, they have no education, and so forth. So imagine if they have no jobs, they have zero income. Yeah. But here comes SSE enterprises, organizations providing them jobs. That's a good start already. In fact, our economist, national economist, Dr. Shiel Abito, at the height of the pandemic, COVID pandemic in the Philippines, wrote in Philippine Daily Inquirer that 2 million employees of the formal sector, that means to say from the public as well as from private sector, mostly from the private sector, they lost their jobs. And where did they go? They went, to community-based organizations and found jobs there. Yeah? So this is the fact or the lesson that Professor Benji was saying. These SSE organization entities, they're resilient during economic recessions. You remember the financial crisis in 1968? The reason why the Philippines rebounded fast is because we have a very large informal sector. Yeah? And secondly, we are a consumer-oriented economy. Yeah? So this one thing that I'd like to highlight, that you are giving them an option, to really earn an income, and that in itself dignifies, their lives. Number two, there is joy in working in an environment where they feel they belong. You know, the organization is theirs. It is sharing. You know, compared to, for example, in factories where the workers feel as if they're treated as slaves. Yeah, so there is a non-monetary value. Yeah, that cannot be counted financially, because the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of mutual sharing is there. Yeah. So these are the things that the SSE enterprises and organizations are providing. And during crisis, for example, I have attended a lot of conferences of cooperatives. The cooperatives are the first one to go out and really help, the members, not only the members, but communities, yeah, distributing goods to people because they needed food. So these are the things that are not monetized. There are benefits in the SSE entities that cannot be monetized. That's all that I'd like to share, Professor Benji and Vince.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Doc Ben, and also again, Rodmark, for the sharing those ideas and insights. So it's basically reiterates or reaffirms this point about the role of the SSE in generating employment for people who would otherwise be unemployed, right? So, or would have a difficult time getting employed in the traditional economy. So yeah, so that's one. And then next is the ability of the SSE to provide social protection. Okay, there are many ways by which the SSE or the SSEOs can provide social protection. One is because some SSEOs are actually providers. So for example, there are a number of SSEOs that are organized as mutual health insurance providers. So these are SSEOs that are by very nature, they are established in order to provide health insurance. Okay, so SSEOs can actually be providers of social protection. Okay, another way, okay, is that SSEOs, for example, cooperatives and social enterprises, they enable entrepreneurship, and through that way, okay, the owners or users and members are able to attain social protection. Okay, as part of their being members or being owners of these enterprises, they're able to achieve social protection. They're now part of the social security systems in their countries, for example. Okay, in the Philippines, for example, if you're in the formal economy, then you are automatically part of the safety net of social protection. So there's social security, there's employees compensation, there's the public health insurance system. Okay, but if you're self-employed, then you have to do it on your own. Okay, and in many cases, because the self-employed have very low incomes, then they yeah. Is there something din Inday? Or yeah. So anyway, to continue. So in many cases, self-employed people have low incomes. So unfortunately, if you're self-employed, you can still be part of Social Security, but then you have a higher contribution because a self-employed person will have to provide for the employee share and also the employer share of Social Security. So you're an informal worker, you have less income, you're more vulnerable jobs or livelihood, but you now have a bigger burden. You have to carry the share of the employer and the employee. So in many cases, it's difficult for informal workers to become a voluntary member of social security systems. Okay, but if informal workers are organized into co-ops, they have social enterprises, they have associations, then that level of organization, okay, becomes a pathway for enrollment into different forms of social protection. And then finally, there are what are called work integration social enterprises. These are forms of SSEOs that are specifically formed to target people with disabilities or those who have been unemployed for a long time and therefore are most vulnerable to be continually unemployed, or to otherwise they target otherwise disadvantaged groups, like for example mothers, okay, who are tied down in domestic work. So this work integration social enterprises is specifically formed, okay, in order to cater to employing and therefore also protecting these types of vulnerable populations or vulnerable workers. So the SSE in different ways is able to provide a pathway for people to get social protection. Again, what is social protection? These are forms of or these are mechanisms to provide income to people who encounter shocks in their lives. Like for example, they get sick, they meet an accident at work, and then therefore they cannot work immediately, or they cannot work permanently, okay? Or they retire permanently from work, or they're temporarily out of work. So unemployment insurance, health insurance, social security, what's called employment compensation in the Philippines. Okay, so these are the different forms of social protection. Okay, and SSE, it's as I guess this is the question of Alice, because there are many SSEOs who are small. Okay, they cannot provide for a good job, a good well-paying job, and also now we have to provide social protection. Okay. Well, let's think of it as a work in progress, or like building a ladder that upscales a person, okay, from being unemployed to being employed, okay, small low wages, then become higher wages, then enrolled in different forms of social protection. As the SSE is able to provide an alternative pathway. If you cannot get it by being in the formal economy where this is automatic, where this is mandated by law in most countries, okay? If you're in the informal economy, this is a challenge. But if you have an SSE, then that SSE enables a pathway to social protection. It opens a window by which informal workers can get access to social security, health insurance, employees compensation, forms of retirement or pensions. Okay. Any question? I see. I'm not sure if there's a question on the chat. Oh, Doc Ben answered Alice. So yeah, okay. So let me continue. So rights at work. By rights at work, we mean there are certain fundamental rights that all workers should enjoy. So at an international level, these are actually 5. So one is the freedom to associate, or just to be blunt about it, the freedom to unionize and then bargain for improvements in your working conditions. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the prohibition of child labor. Okay, so we want children to be at school and at play and not be burdened by work at such a young age. Okay. Third, abolition of forced labor. There should be absence of forced labor. So work is necessary, but it has to be done voluntarily. People should choose to work and choose not to work if they don't want it, and not be forced to work. Okay, like slaves in the olden times. Although of course there's still slaves at the moment. There are people who are trafficked, okay, and then they're forced to work against their will, okay, or under situations which they find violative of fundamental rights. Okay, so that's still happening. So that's the fourth is safety at work. Also, sorry, fourth is voice, okay, in the workplace, and then fifth is occupational safety and health and safety. Okay, so these are the fundamental. Oh, sorry. Fourth is non-discrimination at work. So I mixed that up. Fourth, right at work is non-discrimination at work. So we want equal treatment at work. So that means without regard to gender, for example. So women should have just the same right to have a work and to have the same rights at work as men, okay? Or other gender identities should not be a barrier to enjoying work, to having work, and enjoying rights at work, conditions at work, similar to other workers. Nationalities, okay, political beliefs, religious affiliations, all of that should not be barriers to being treated equally at work. So fourth is non-discrimination at work. And then recently, just a few years ago, the ILO decided or agreed, okay, the governments, employers, and workers who are members of the ILO agreed to include occupational safety and health as the fifth fundamental right at work. Okay, so we now have 5 fundamental rights at work. And other than that, there are also labor standards. So these standards are certain minimum conditions at work, okay, that people should enjoy, although they have a certain different level from fundamental rights at work. So these standards would include questions of wages, of working hours, for example. Okay, so at the national level, this is at the international level, this is different countries are allowed to set different standards with regards to wages, working hours. Okay, there's no internationally set standard for that. Okay, so how does the SSE enable rights at work? Again, through different ways. One is that through cooperatives and associations of informal workers, they're able to they gain enough leverage so that they can bargain, for example, with municipal authorities. So there are a lot of experiences in different countries by which waste pickers have been able to organize associations, if not cooperatives, and using that organizational strength, they're able to leverage local authorities to recognize their work and then to provide good working conditions, even if they have an informal status. Okay. Another way by which rights at work are enabled is that unions and organizations of workers in the SSE or SSE organizations cooperate in order to improve compliance with labor rights and labor standards. So there are already certain examples of this, although this is probably not as widespread yet as we would want it. Unions, of course, which represent workers in the informal economy, and SSEOs, whom in many cases represent informal workers, for them to collaborate to ensure compliance with labor rights and labor standards. Okay. And then finally, SSEOs, because as we mentioned earlier, because they are stakeholder focused, okay, they're able to ensure compliance with improving labor rights, labor standards, and workers' welfare. There's a case study of cooperatives in Italy, and it shows that during the Great Recession, so it was during the economic crisis from 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, okay, where cooperatives enjoyed significant growth despite economic recession in the traditional economy. And then workers in those cooperatives were able to improve their working conditions, even amidst an economic recession. So this is an example of how SSEOs are resilient during economic crisis, and they're able to improve rights at work and working conditions despite the adversities of an economic crisis. Okay. Any questions? If none, I'll proceed. So, SSEO also enables social dialogue. Social dialogue, as defined by the International Labor Organizations, just refers to any type of consultation, whether formal or informal. So this could be consultations, meetings. Formally, this would be this could be in the form of collective bargaining, or formal bodies like tripartite bodies, where employers, representatives of employers, representatives of workers, and representatives of government sit together to make decisions that cover certain areas. Okay, so in the Philippines, there are tripartite bodies, for example, that talk about new labor ordinances or labor rules. Okay, I guess in many jurisdictions that is the case. There are tripartite social dialogue bodies. Okay, in the Philippines also, wage setting, the government rules on minimum wages, they are set by tripartite bodies. So there are representatives of government, employers, and workers in what are called wage boards that decide on minimum wage changes or minimum wage increases. So those are just different forms of social dialogue, formal or informal, between employers, workers, and government. Sometimes there's a social dialogue plus that includes civil society organizations other than the usual tripartite actors, government, employers, workers. So the social dialogue plus includes civil society organizations. Okay. So SSE actually by its very nature, because the SSE is stakeholder focus, they have a democratic and participatory set of governance, then that actually by itself enables social dialogue. Or owners, members, users, consumers of SSE products and services, there's a more horizontal set of relationships instead of a vertical hierarchical structure. So SSEOs are different from traditional businesses where there's a rigid hierarchy and demarcation between you're the owner, so you can decide. Okay, managers, they make operational decisions. Workers are ordered around. Okay, they don't have participation in the decision. Users, okay, they decide by buying, but other than that, they don't have a role anymore. So that's the traditional setup. In SSEOs break down that rigid hierarchy. And so there's like a fluidity in the relationship between the owners, the managers, the workers, and users. In SSEOs, there are ways by which these different actors have certain levels of participation or increased voice in how the SSEO operates. In the best of cases, we have examples of self-management among SSEO workers. In other words, these workers have a big role. They are able to participate in the decisions of the SSEO, even if they're just hired workers, okay, which in a traditional company denies you a role in decision-making within the company. Okay. Self-management also is, so self-management again has different forms. Okay, this could mean representatives of workers sitting in the boards of the enterprises. Okay, this could be different ways of consultations between managers and workers. Okay, this could be in mechanisms for SSE workers to organize unions and then bargain with the SSEO owners. So for example, even cooperatives, okay, workers should be able to unionize and then they can bargain with the cooperative itself, right? So self-management also becomes useful in terms of rebalancing work and life. So we have this buzzword about work-life balance, right? So and actually we'll talk about that later in situations of in a digital setup. Okay, in a work from home setup, sometimes the work and life balance becomes challenged because now the boundaries between what is work and what is life has become blurred if you're working from home. But with mechanisms for self-management, then workers are able to raise issues, grievances, and have them settled in an expeditious manner or way. Okay. Again, this is enabled by the fact that SSEOs have participatory and democratic ways of operating. I see on the chat, Heira said sociocracy as tools of self-management. Actually, I'm not familiar with sociocracy. Okay, so of course there's autocracy, right? Which more or less means dictatorship, or again, a contrast to self-management. Is that what sociocracy means? I'm not familiar with the term, Hera.
I guess sociocracy is tools for self-management, and it's common using by worker co-op movement. They have a circle, and then they have a method how to decision to how to use a decision making as what is it? But what you need is like a consent. So everyone has a voice, and then as well they have to get consent to decide something. It's in the organization. It is not new actually, but for me it's the way how use democracy more beyond of democracy. When you said one man, one vote, but it's voting only as I told you, as I remember and I understand. When in cooperative, one man, one vote, and then you just give your voice to vote, but sometimes you don't listen to what they want or the reason or even you don't have their consent, like literally consent, and then it's not democracy. So sociocracy use it as how everyone has voice and really use their voice and get their consent. Check.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
yeah. So I guess that's a term in order to emphasize voice and participation of people in an organization or an institution. So Sarah mentioned a circle. Sometimes I've read about a wheel and a spoke. They call it a wheel and a spoke structure, right? So not as hierarchical like a pyramid, for example. So yeah, thank you, Hera, for that. So I guess I learned a new word term for today. So yeah, moving on. So I guess a last point about how the SSE can enable decent work is that the SSE is a way by which we transition people from informal status, from the informal economy to the formal arrangements, which means achievement of the different components of decent work. So I will not dwell too much on this because I think this has been discussed before, how SSEOs can be a way or a lever to transition workers to formality. Okay, so an example of this frequently mentioned in studies is, for example, in agricultural co-op. So many farmers in different countries are the poorest of the poor in those countries. But by organizing into co-ops, they're able to improve their working conditions, their incomes, their livelihood. Okay? And through those cooperatives, they transition from levels of informality to degrees of formality. And then they enjoy social protection, they enjoy voice and participation. They're able to, through their organization, dialogue with authorities for reforms and achievement of their demands. SSEOs can help people access affordable basic necessities and services. Okay? SSEOs are able to articulate the demands of informal workers, mainly through organizing and then campaigning, okay, and lobbying of SSEOs. Finally, SSEOs organize markets and resources for workers, for producers. So again, this is just a reiteration of ideas earlier discussed. But by transitioning workers from the informal economy to the formal economy, that of course helps achieve decent work, because in the formal economy there's the arrangements of formality enable achievement of decent work. For example, social protection, recognition of the right to organize and then bargain, okay, voice and participation through bargaining or by forming associations. So all of that, okay, are improved when workers have gained formal status. Okay. Let me check on the chat. Okay. Okay, so I hope I did not miss anything. Okay. So yeah, so just moving on to this case study. We can see this at work through the experience of the Mondragon Cooperative. How can an SSEO improve decent work or make workers as a lever for which workers can attain decent work? We can see that in Mondragon. Mondragon is the largest cooperative in the world. There's 95, it's made up of 95 cooperatives. So it's not just one cooperative, it's actually a group or a network of cooperatives. 95 cooperatives with 138 subsidiaries. It's actually spread around the world, although it's mainly based in the so-called Basque region of Spain. It is in different sectors of the economy. It's in industry or manufacturing. It's in retail trade. It's also in finance and also in education. Okay, it employs more than 80,000 workers and it has revenues of billions of euros. So it's actually a very big, or it's actually the largest group of cooperatives in the world. Okay. It didn't get to that overnight, of course. It took years and decades for it to grow. Okay. But part of its magic, okay, is its core principles. How does it operate? Well, one, it has this concept of broad worker ownership of enterprises. So it's organized in the form of a cooperative, okay, or workers cooperatives. So the workers themselves are the owners of the cooperatives. Okay, so it flips the traditional situation where capital hires labor. That's the traditional company, right? So employers hire workers. Okay, here with the Mondragon cooperatives, it's the worker members who hire managers to help them manage the cooperatives. Okay, so there are mechanisms. We'll not go into too much detail because at this moment it's not that important. Although in the text you can read it, of course. Okay, that the Mondragon has organized so that, okay, the real decision making is in the hands of its worker members. So in one Mondragon cooperative, it could have hundreds or thousands of worker members. So through general assemblies of that, they make the most important decisions, and then they delegate the management of the cooperatives to a smaller number. There's a CEO, there are certain managers, there are supervisors, but all of those managers, supervisors have accountabilities to the whole cooperative, which is of course is made up of its worker members. Okay, so it flips the traditional relationship where capital hires labor. Instead, here you have labor hiring capital. Okay, so the real decision making is in the hands of worker members. Okay, so that's why Mondragon says that one of its core principles is worker ownership of enterprises. Okay. Second, by which Mondragon has been able to grow, okay, and maintain its and sustain itself is through intercooperation. So by diversifying into different cooperatives or setting up different cooperatives where they have synergy, okay, then Mondragon is able to become more resilient, okay, even if there's an economic crisis or there's different adversities. Mondragon is able to overcome because it's able, and it's able to even able better to compete with other companies because the different cooperatives between the Mondragon network are able to cooperate. Okay, so this, we mentioned earlier, there are cooperatives in industry, okay, but there are also Mondragon cooperatives in retail, and also in finance, and also in education. So if you look at it, this actually form a certain synergy. So for example, a Mondragon cooperative in manufacturing will not take out a loan from a traditional bank. Instead, it will get a loan from another Mondragon cooperative that is in banking and financing. Okay? The Mondragon cooperatives in education are able to train workers, they're able to train managers in cooperativism. Okay? The products of the cooperatives in manufacturing are sold by Mondragon cooperatives in retail trading. Okay, so this different Mondragon cooperatives are able to take advantage of their placement in the different sectors of the economy in order to increase their productivity, efficiency, and better compete with more traditional businesses in the same sector. So second, intercooperation. So that's a leverage by which Mondragon has been able to survive and thrive. Third is that for Mondragon, engaging in business is a way by which to pursue its long-term vision for transformation. So I guess this is not different from the concept of a social enterprise, right? As a social enterprise engages in business, so that's how a traditional company operates, right? But then it is imbued or it is guided with a certain vision of improving the well-being of certain communities that it serves or even the society as a whole. So that, I think, is a key ingredient for Mondragon. Okay, the cooperatives are engaged in actual businesses, so these cooperatives earn profits, but then these are not simply profit maximizing companies to the detriment of all other considerations. Instead, they earn a profit, okay? But so in order to sustain the cooperatives, but those cooperatives are able to hire workers so that these workers improve their well-being. Right? They serve certain communities to their products and services. Okay? So Mondragon has a long-term vision of transforming society and improving like social well-being. Of course, Mang Mondragon itself says that this, of course, is challenged by what has been called in some studies as isomorphism. Like the bigger that a cooperative grows, then it more and more resembles a traditional corporation. So we were able to talk to Mondragon representatives of Mondragon, and they said this is a real challenge for them. Okay, the more that Mondragon has grown bigger, then it has to consciously fight acting like a traditional profit maximizing company. So, for example, abroad, Mondragon has subsidiaries in other countries. In other countries, those Mondragon subsidiaries are not organized as cooperatives, where the members or the workers are the members of the cooperative. Instead, those Mondragon subsidiaries more or less operate as traditional businesses. Why? Well, because in other countries, the cooperative's tradition and spirit are not as strong as it's where Mondragon came from, its home country or home region of Basque in Spain. So that's just one aspect to how Mondragon is also challenged by this tendency to become a traditional company while it becomes bigger. Okay. Any questions about Mondragon?
I think, Prof, we have a question here from Maxim. Is there a difference between SSE and social entrepreneurship?
Well, I guess this must have been discussed before. But the way I understand it, so the SSE is this ecosystem of different organizations, institutions that operate by a different set of rules. I use the word different DNA from a traditional corporation. What kinds of organizations comprise the SSE? Well, one is a social enterprise. Another is a cooperative. A third would be an association. Another would be a foundation. So there are different organizations that comprise what is now called an SSE. So a social enterprise is just one form of of organizations that pursue what we call SSE. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Yeah, I think we can go ahead muna, Prof.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, any questions about the Mondragon Cooperative? If none, then we can go to the breakout session. Okay. So
Yeah, I can set it up, Prof. Siguro we can have like 2 to 3 minutes to go to the restroom or to get some coffee while I prepare the breakout room.
see, sure. So let's have a 2 to 3 minute break.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll prepare the breakout room muna po. You can get coffee or you can take your break.
Sige, salamat. Thank you.
Prof Bench, how many minutes are we supposed to be on the breakout rooms?
What? I allotted 30 minutes, but unfortunately, I've been talking too much. It's now 4 o'clock. So I hope we can have a breakout of 10 minutes, and then a discussion of another 10 minutes. I hope
Okay,
that's
sure.
possible.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will be opening breakout rooms siguro for 15 minutes and then I'll just assign people to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Give me 1 second here. Open. Okay, so I have opened 3 rooms, Kalayaan, and then Kaligayahan, and then Kalayaan and Kapayapaan. I'll just be assigning people to the breakout rooms. Okay. Yeah. So let me just do it now. Okay. So give me that.
So this is the instructions for our participants. So this discuss two examples of SCEOs where you are familiar with or you are actually engaged in, and then see how they fare in terms of the decent work agenda. Then, of course, talk about how the SSEO can improve decent work for its members, workers, okay? And also for the question of transitioning, and then assign a participant to make a short presentation to our plenary. So hopefully we can finish that in 10, 15 minutes, right?
Okay, sure. Sure, no worries, Prof. Let me just move people now to the breakout rooms first.
They can get a screenshot of this if they want to. They might lose this in the breakout. I can put it in the chat anyway. I think I did something wrong.
It's okay. It's okay. Ano,
Can you place me in any of the breakout rooms? I opened my desktop, but it has no audio, so I opened another. I entered again through my cell phone.
Prof Bench, Doc Benny, you can move